Right. Hello, we're live. Right. Thank you everyone for joining us, taking time out of your day. My name is Ben Russell. I am lead technical consultant for Complete IT in the Bristol office. I'm joined by Leigh, who is a security and compliance specialist who works for one of our partners, ConnectWise. So I think for the past few years, we've all been in a bit of an odd place. The world as we know it has definitely changed. And some of it has sped up technologies that would otherwise have taken a while to become mainstream. And some of it has delayed progress on various things. I think the one thing that we can all agree on is that things have definitely changed. Okay. That's someone's my wax off. It's not good. Bear with.
You're just having some mic issues, Ben.
Yeah, apparently so.
Okay, I can pick up while you're looking at. So just wanted to say thanks for having me today, and thanks for joining the webinar today. Just got an introduction to my background. I'm a security sales engineer with ConnectWise. I've been in the security space for around about 5 years, and I come from an information compliance background. So I was first working on implementing and auditing ISO 27001, and that was working with an MSP. So familiar with the types of challenges. ConnectWise are providing partner security services now, and we're working with CIT with those security services, and they're co-managed SOC models and security services that we've been providing for around about 2 years now. So I think we wanted to share some insights today in what we've seen in regards of security landscape while we've been providing the services, and then Ben's going to expand a little bit upon what CIT are doing in the security space.
Lovely, thanks for that. Hopefully this sounds better.
Yeah, you're coming through fine now, Ben.
Fantastic. Okay, good. Gotta love technical issues. So yes, yeah, thanks for that, Leigh. Thanks for taking over there. So yeah, as I was saying, over the past few years, things have changed, and you know, we at Complete IT and our partners have essentially worked, you know, tirelessly to get our clients to a place where they can continue working from home, and you know, being able to access the data that they need to keep their businesses running. So you know, we've essentially created a new norm, and you know, although times seem to be semi going back to normal, I think the landscape of how we work has kind of changed forever. A lot of organizations are adopting, you know, optional work from home. You know, some organizations have fully closed offices and are fully working from home, and some are taking more of a hybrid approach. So I think, you know, regardless of you know, the rules being lifted, as I say, things have pretty much changed forever. And the way that we work is not the only thing that's changed. You know, the way that information security is dealt with is having changed with that. There are essentially hackers and cyber criminals who are taking advantage of people working from home and the vulnerabilities that come with it. So essentially today's panel is discussing that and discussing ways to overcome that, with a bit more of a dedicated session on endpoint security in particular. Obviously, when we talk about endpoint security, we're talking about laptops, desktops, the things that you're in front of day in, day out using. As I said, Leigh is joined us from ConnectWise. He's going to take the first part of the webinar and just kind of explain how he and ConnectWise has noticed the landscape of things changing. If you do have any questions as we go, please just add them to the chat, and we will get to them at the end and hopefully be able to get through them all. So without further ado, I will hand again over to Leigh to start.
Thanks, Ben. We can progress the slide. Great. So we're starting off with why cybercrime is exploding. So bold statement, but it's something that we are definitely seeing. We've seen that growing trend over the past few years that cybercrime is sort of exponentially growing from where it once was. It's an issue we're seeing for our partners. It's an issue we're seeing for small businesses out there. And it's getting worse. And for those not taking action, it is getting significantly worse, and it's only a matter of time if they're not already being impacted. If you can progress slide. So why is that happening? So primarily the cyber threat landscape has changed. So what I mean by that is that we've seen year on year vast adoption of technology. But over the past couple of years, that has accelerated, and work from home, COVID, restrictions along those lines have accelerated parts of that journey. But we were seeing before that point, normal technology adoption sat at around about 1 to 2% of your technology stack was being updated on a yearly basis. It's fairly steady, fairly manageable. You could consider what you were doing with it. Past couple of years, that's gone in excess of 10% of the technology stack has changed. So both 2020 and 2021 have seen that in excess of 10% of that stack changing. Now, new technology means new vulnerabilities. And if we're honest, security has always taken a back seat for many organizations for a lot of years. So we've got to the point where we already had a bit of a security gap, and now we've rapidly changed our technology, some of our work from home habits, and there are vulnerabilities that could be exploited. I can progress the slide. So what are the challenges? So the main challenge is threats are changing fast. And I talked about it a little bit. We've got a linear progression of security technology. So what does that mean? It means that year on year, security technology is improving, finding better ways of identifying threats and responding to them. But it's not happening at the same rate as threats are. So in terms of threats, we're seeing exponential growth of threats. Hackers are bypassing traditional security controls, and they're finding new exposure, as well as the stuff that they already knew about. Example recently has been cloud exposure in Log4j. Pretty much every software provider out there has had some kind of impact from Log4j. It's been difficult for them. It's been difficult to check. And there's been bad security advice going out there. I've seen several companies going and saying, hey, we've got a golden ticket, and this tool will 100% tell you if you've been affected by Log4j. And then you find out that that scanning tool can't actually look into your end vendor application because Log4j can also be embedded into your applications. So it's giving a false sense of security. So the fixes aren't straightforward. On top of this, getting a security expert that's going to understand that is quite expensive, and it's difficult and time consuming training those people, let alone putting a team in place. Go to the next slide. What else has happened? Well, if that situation wasn't bad enough, the other big thing that has really shown this boom of cybercrime is that threat actors have been teaming up. They've turned into a business model. It's a subscription model, much like any other software provider. So we've got ransomware as a service. Wonderful term, wish it didn't exist, but it does, sadly. And we have this model where basically you can sign up as an affiliate. The tools, software, and the attack models, which are known to work, provided to you, and you earn a percentage of the takings of any attack that you perform. So what this is effectively doing is it's taking these attacks from the enterprise model where people would just put a lot of energy into getting a lot of money from one enterprise to all sorts of people from all around the world having a go at trying to exploit and attack smaller companies. Now we've got several groups out there doing this. So DarkSide, Revil, Dharma, they're all examples of groups that have this model in place. They're selling their service on the dark web, and it's just significantly increasing the likelihood that you're going to become a victim or a target of one of these groups. So what's going to happen if we don't do anything about it? Well, we can see that pain because there are an awful lot of organizations that aren't doing much about this right now, or they're waiting until they feel like the right moment, or there are the challenges around what that looks like, what they can do. So we're seeing year-on-year increase in ransomware. So in 2020, it was every 14 seconds. In 2021, 11 seconds. And we've yet to see if it's going to come down even further. So every 11 seconds, we're seeing an attack. We are also seeing that this is something that all organizations are experiencing. Whether they're aware of it or not, we are seeing around about sort of 55% of organizations being hit by ransomware in some form, or at least being targeted by ransomware. They may prevent it, they may get hit by it, and to lesser or greater degrees, depending on how sophisticated the person is who's trying to do it. Remember, it's not all big sophisticated organizations doing it now. There's lots of individuals. Now we do a lot of annual studies. We do an annual study of a company called Vance and Bourne. So a lot of these statistics are born out of that. We're talking to partners, we're talking to SMBs, and we're asking them, what does their security landscape look like? But we also look at other studies, and they're all painting the same picture, that the situation is bad and it's getting worse. So there are a few things that make that a little bit more challenging in the UK specifically, and that is the UK's adoption of security. We are in the UK quite behind in terms of our spend on security, and the threat community knows that. We're actually third lowest in the world for countries that actually spend a percentage of their IT spend on security. I mean, that's a scary stat. For me, that was a scary stat when I saw that. I thought we would be a lot more sophisticated than that, but we're not. You know, we might have sophisticated controls, but the technology spend's just not there. We've got the last stat on there, which is the average cost of ransomware, including recovery, around about 840,000 or 620,000 pounds. It's a big number. Now, it does include enterprise as well, so that does skew some of the stats, but the threat is still very real. If we can progress. Yep. So what is the true impact of cybercrime? Now, these are some of these numbers are US-based numbers, so they don't directly apply, but the graphs and the statistics are the same in the UK. What it's showing is an exponential rise in the cost of phishing attacks, the cost of ransom, the cost of business email compromise, and the numbers that are being performed in the background. The other sort of challenging part of that is, regardless of the fact of whatever this ransomware payment may be, or average ransomware payment, reality is that ransom is basically designed to be what an attacker thinks you can afford. And additionally to that, that only accounts for about 20% of the true cost. Now, why is it only 20%? Well, the reason is why it's only 20% because you have the cost of being down and out of business. You have the cost of recovery. You have the cost of being back up and running. Scary stat there, average downtime, 16 days. That's the average amount of time that a company is without IT services following a ransomware attack. And I think a lot of people need to ask themselves, can you as a business afford to be out of business for that length of time? Are SMBs a target? So we've seen a lot of stats, some of them are enterprise skewed, and the question that comes up quite regularly is, are SMBs a target? Surely this is targeted enterprise. Well, we've talked about the ransomware as a service. You know, that's making a business model so that pretty much everyone is fair game. And the thing you have to remember as well is that not all of these groups are sophisticated. So it is far more challenging to attack an enterprise solution than it is an SMB customer. Usually the controls are weaker and the vulnerabilities are more vast. In addition to that, you are a target because you make money. The biggest mistake you can make is thinking that the motivation of an attacker is to get your data. Unless you're trading in state secrets, that's not the target. The target's money. Yeah, compromising you as a company and identifying how much money they can exploit out of you. So if you make money, if you're a company, you have revenue coming in, you're a potential target for ransomware or a cyber attacker. Now, why don't we hear more about this? Well, it doesn't make interesting news. Case in point, you know, just yesterday, news story coming out that KP Snacks have been hit by a cyber attack. big enterprise customer. They got hit on the 28th of Jan. They're still dealing with that. They're still dealing with the outfall. They probably will be for another week at least. And they're projecting that they're going to be impacted as a business for at least 3 months. And that's on the enterprise side. For that enterprise attack, there's probably been tens of smaller companies that have been attacked in that same time frame that we won't hear anything about.
Just to add to that, I think the majority of attacks on SMB clients are attacks of opportunity. So it will be a case that a hacker is not specifically targeting your organization. They are using software and bots to go out and find vulnerabilities across the network, and it just so happens that if your organization has got that vulnerability, you're now a target. So that's a big thing as well. So you don't have to be special.
Yeah, that's a great point, Ben. It's being a target by attachment, and that is that you are utilizing the same software, or you're utilizing something that has the same vulnerability of a bigger attack vector on maybe an enterprise. You know, we saw that on things like Hafnium. We saw that when the Ukraine was under attack. In fact, loads of SMBs got hit by the fact that Ukraine has been hit by cyber attacks. So yeah, absolutely. You don't have to be a direct target, just a target by proxy. So how was home working added to the risk? So once upon a time, we protected the perimeter. It was our business, it was our head office, and that was sufficient. The majority of people were inside that bubble. We had protection policies in place and processes, and that did a lot. But rapid adoption of technology, home working, we've all have an increased attack surface now. Other technologies that can be put in place that can reduce that risk depending on use case. But one thing you always have is the people element. And fundamentally, when people are separated from everybody else, they are slightly more prone to not follow policy and control. I'm sure you're gasping at shock at that, but it's a known thing that what it does is it makes them more exploitable. So they're more likely to click on those phishing links, more likely to follow something they're not supposed to do, more likely to log into something that they're not supposed to with a machine they're not supposed to. So yeah, it does add to the risk. You do need to have some appropriate controls in place.
Okay. And so Leigh, how can one individual get an attack to affect the whole company? So
yeah, so many instances here, but we've got a quite good story from one of our partners, and it was a partner who had a trusted advisor come in, and that trusted advisor was a solicitor. So the solicitor brought his own machine in because he's a third party. I'm sure, you know, I don't think many of you will have a solicitor as part of your company. Usually they are someone who's contracted or third party. And he was given network access so he could read through privileged documentation. We were monitoring that client environment with an endpoint solution, EDR tool. And within a few minutes, a whole bunch of the machines started pinging that they were being ransomware attacked. Now, we were able to stop that attack because the software was identifying it, and we were able to sort of cut that off. But our SOC team were looking at that and going, what's going on, guys? You've got a machine here that's attacking. So we let them know, and you know, it was, lo and behold, this machine was infected by ransomware and was trying to spread throughout the whole company. So it's a very good example where one machine can cause that problem. And if you don't respond effectively to it, you can get further compromise over time.
Yeah, absolutely. I think obviously looking at kind of your own company as well, it very much depends on a number of aspects. It depends on kind of how you're set up to work, how your users are set up to work, and who you are. You know, one individual could be you know, an admin assistant that's not got access to very much. That one individual could be the CEO of the company that's got the you know, the keys to the castle. So what we can't really do is just have a one size fits all approach to security, which kind of leads us on to the next slide, which is the best way to protect home users. I think the answer to that is that there is no one best way. Security as a whole is a very layered approach, and the fact that we're having to have this conversation about new threats with home users proves that it's never going to be there's never going to be a silver bullet. It's always going to be a constant battle. Cybersecurity is a marathon rather than a sprint to the finish. There's always going to be a battle between people trying to protect themselves and companies trying to protect users, and hackers trying to break that protection. So there is no one best solution. There's a number of solutions that significantly help, which is why we're here today. One of the bigger ones, which we will get onto in a moment, is endpoint security. The other is user training, teaching your users what they should and shouldn't be doing and what to look out for. They are essentially the last line of defense against attack. And teaching them what they should be doing, what they shouldn't click on, what they should do in the event of attack could be the difference between ransomware spreading throughout the entirety of the organization, or it just infecting one computer if it gets that far. So end user training is a big one. But moving on to a kind of more automated way of protection and that extra layer. So endpoint security. So what is endpoint security? Endpoint security is the practice of securing endpoints or entry points of end user devices. So that would be your laptops, your desktops, your mobile phones, all of which contain potentially important data, personal data, things that you don't necessarily want people getting access to or selling on. So when we're talking about endpoint security, we are talking security specifically for these devices. Essentially, the penultimate point of attack. So what is the solution? We've hopefully all got antivirus on our computer as a minimum. What we are talking about here is a level above that. And I'll get into the more specifics on that. But what we're talking about specifically at the moment is a dedicated endpoint detect and response agent, which is essentially implemented on the device to protect the user. The agent essentially monitors the device and processes for indications that they're being used for malicious intent. And all threats are analyzed and remediated by a dedicated SOC. So I'll again get into the details about that in a moment.
And I think that's a key bit just to add there, is that when we talked about there being many risks and there being many ways of approaches, and end user education is very good, but it's the combination of the EDR and the SOC to look over what's happening at that technology layer. Look what's happening over on that endpoint.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you have this extra set of eyes looking at everything constantly, because we don't truthfully know exactly what attack vector someone's going to try to take.
No.
So by having that expert level of services looking over the top of it, you can catch a lot more than doing so without just using the automated agent.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for that. So I said a few things in the last slide. So what do they mean? So what is EDR? EDR is endpoint detect and response. It's a specific bit of software that uses artificial intelligence, and it uses behavioral analysis to essentially look at what's going on in your laptop and or desktop, and it monitors for legitimate sort of network traffic and behavior, and is able to set a baseline. What's normally going on with this laptop, what is the usual day-to-day kind of usage of it. It's able to then see any changes in that, which is not something that antivirus can do. With this particular bit of software, all of the threats that it detects are actually fully analyzed by a SOC team. And again, I'll go on to that bit in a moment. So it's all reviewed and reported and essentially action will be automatically taken. So yeah, I have antivirus on my computer. Does that not cover it? So as I mentioned, antivirus, we should all have that on our computer anyway. And in the past, antivirus has been a must-have, and it still is. But as Leigh said, the landscape of threats is changing, and one thing that you would more than likely have heard in the news is the phrase zero-day attacks, and these are becoming more and more frequent. And there's no way for antivirus to detect zero-day attacks. Antivirus works on signatures and known files. So if that file isn't known, then your antivirus is not going to do anything towards it. So because these zero-day attacks are becoming so much more prevalent, we need technology to be able to detect that. So what are zero-day attacks? So zero-day attacks are essentially security vulnerabilities that are unknown to the manufacturer. So if we take let's take the Log4j incident as an example, the zero-day attack means that the attack has been implemented and used to attack someone without the manufacturer of the software knowing that vulnerability even existed. So essentially, as it says there, the 0 days is the number of days that the software providers have known about the vulnerability in order to put out a security patch. So it's scary. It's concerning because with the majority of viruses, it's looking to mainly the users as the vulnerability, whereas with the majority of zero-day attacks, it's looking at things that the users have got very little ability to control. Vulnerabilities in the software that they use, vulnerabilities in the in the hardware that they're using, and bits like that. So it's a concerning one, and it's becoming a lot more prevalent, as I say. So as I mentioned before, with the EDR software, there is something called a SOC, which stands for Security Operations Center, and what this is essentially a entire team of security engineers sitting in the background, getting the monitoring alerts, getting the information that's coming from the EDR software. Is feeding through the information so that not only can the artificial intelligence analyze what's going on, the human experts can have a look and make additional judgments, and can make judgments that artificial intelligence can't, and they also deal with the threat. So if there is something that happens on that device, then there is a chain of events that happens, all happens very quickly, which ends with a person in a security operations center essentially remediating that security threat, and essentially doing what's needed to either protect that device, protect the network as a whole, protect the user, and protect the company data. So
it's really important for those zero-day attacks and fileless attacks as well. Well, there isn't actually a file associated, so the attack's coming through a web browser potentially. And the reason being is because it's a zero-day attack, the attack itself isn't recognized. So it's only recognized by the EDR software when it starts doing something malicious. Yeah. You want to know what that malicious thing was and where it's been stopped. So that's the difference. The SOC element can give you is they can give you some of the how far down the attack has that got, and what was it doing? Have I had passwords compromised as part of that attack? Have I got a user account on there that's malicious? Has it come from another device on the network? Remember the example I gave you earlier. We were able to tell through that EDR and the SOC combination that the attack actually came from another device on the network. We just left that to the tool on its own. Yes, it would protect you. For how long, I don't know, but it would protect you. But we wouldn't know it came from another device. We wouldn't have that intelligence. And that's what that's layering up.
Yeah, absolutely. You want not only the protection, but you want the accountability. You want to know where it's come from. You want to be able to learn potentially from those mistakes. If there is a bit of an open gate somewhere, you want to know that, to be able to close that. And yeah, as Leigh said, so putting the 0-day side of things and what this does together, it looks for the change in behavior. There is no way a bit of software can detect a 0-day attack based on the signatures of that bit of software itself. So what this software looks for is the behavioral change of the computer that this 0-day attack causes, whether that be, a huge increase in the amount of RAM that the computer is using, for example, or a big change in the amount of network traffic that's being sent through. And those are very kind of high level examples. This kind of detects things on much smaller, more detailed scale.
Yeah, it aligns to, if anyone's familiar, it aligns to the MITRE framework. So MITRE defines all the attack vectors. Now, anybody that wants to go to sleep quite early, have a look at MITRE. There's some 180 something different attack vectors, and they are all different ways of exploitation, but they all have a known method of entry and things they do that are malicious. So it's that type of behavior that software is looking for.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think one thing about security is it definitely all seems a bit doom and gloom, but it encompasses everything that we do these days. Without a doubt. Without a doubt, if you are using computers for work, security is involved. It should these days be as natural as locking your car door, or locking your home in the morning before you leave. It should be something that is at the top of consideration, rather than, as you said earlier, Leigh, just a bit of an annoyance that you have to add to the budget. The official recommendation from a lot of security point of view is that security should actually have its own budget outside of the IT budget, because it doesn't just encompass computers. It's everything that you do now, seeing as that is the way that organizations work. So sorry, digressed a little bit there. So is this endpoint security just for home working? No, not at all. The issues with home working, as Leigh said, is that it opens up different vectors of attack, different threats. Normally, when you're working in an office, you will be behind a enterprise grade firewall, which is adding another layer of protection. These 0-day attacks are not just aimed at home users in any way. So no, the point that we're kind of trying to get across with the home users is that having this software on home user devices is more important now than ever. But having this software in general is more important now than ever. It's not just going to affect home users, it's going to affect everybody within a corporate network with a dedicated firewall and dedicated security. The chances of these things getting through are less, but again, there's no such thing as a silver bullet when it comes to security. You can put all the security you want in, but there's still a chance. What you do in security is you layer security. So it becomes a lot more difficult for things to get through. So no, endpoint security is not just for home users. It's an additional layer for users who are full-time in the office, or again, a hybrid approach. You want to be able to deal with any kind of situation that might come up. So yeah, all this security software, won't it slow down my computer? I think we all remember the days of having Norton on our computers at home, and you knew back in the day when you had antivirus scanning. You definitely go and make a cup of coffee in the afternoon and let it do its thing, because you would notice that it slows down. Whereas with this software, essentially, because it's always working in the background, it has its own allocation of resources. Where you tend to find slowdowns on computers, it tends to be when there's sudden spikes of activity. Whereas, with the majority of security software these days, it runs pretty stably in the background.
Yeah, EDRs are sort of always on, constantly monitoring, whereas your traditional AVs, they used to slow down because they would be doing a deep scan. And during that, they would be hogging huge amounts of resources to scan your whole environment. And you simply don't need to take that approach of EDR, because we're scanning everything on access, we're scanning everything on demand, we're doing an initial scan when it's first installed. But from there onwards, we're monitoring every process running. So we're not allowing the opportunity for anything new to introduce itself into that environment. Hence, we don't need to keep on doing these periodic scans. You can if you really want to. It's going to capture a few things maybe, but it's really not reducing your risk very much compared to how the EDR is.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you might notice a bit of a slowdown if your computer's kind of 10, 15 years old. But I think if you've got a computer of that age, I think we probably need to have a slightly different conversation. Right. So, is there more of a threat for having home workers than working in the office? Yes and no. Yes, there is. Your home has many different types of threats. As I mentioned before, you're not sitting behind a corporate firewall, having an additional layer of protection. But even down to having other computers on the network, that the kids' computers, the partners' computers. You don't know what's necessarily on those, and the likelihood is that if you're working from home, you've got one internet connection which is connected to the network. There is the chance for there to be some kind of crossover there. So that's why we need to kind of protect that work device. There is obviously other threats. Children, although I don't know if I would call children threats. Some people might get upset with that, but
intentional threats.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Kids find a laptop, they want to play. That could potentially compromise data. Accidental deletion, it happens, and there's 100 stories.
It's just worth remembering that risk in security risk isn't all malicious. In fact, an awful lot of security risk is accidental or not understanding the concepts of things. So we talk about risk in terms of confidentiality, integrity, and availability. Now, integrity basically just means that you're stopping data from being deleted and or you have backups. So yes, you can have integrity risks by someone coming on and accidentally deleting something, or sending it confidentiality risks by sending something to the wrong person. May not be intentional, but it can still happen.
No, exactly. Obviously, endpoint protection is not necessarily going to help with that side of things. Which is again where user training comes in, where having policies that lock your laptop after a certain while come in. Making sure the cat doesn't sleep on the keyboard and end up writing emails to who knows who. So there's a lot of things to consider. So there's definitely different threats for home workers, and potentially more. As I said, there is less overall protection with working from home, but I don't think that should discourage you from working from home. It's just a different landscape now. There's things to consider, such as changing of policies, changing of procedures for those home workers. As I said, security, making sure that people are aware of things that could happen. You might not even consider that your kids could come in and accidentally delete some files, but it happens. It does. It happens, and things get spilt. Things get spilt everywhere, though. That's the thing. So it's just kind of thinking what could happen. And again, as I said, security can be a bit doom and gloom, and it can be worst case scenario. But to ensure that the company data and personal data is protected, and that your organizations are protected, you do have to sometimes think in worst case scenario and essentially put things into place to mitigate those. And then one more thing that will help us sleep better at night. Right. Q&A.
And we had a couple of questions through.
Let's have a look.
Got a couple of questions from Martin. I'm happy to dive into either of these, and I'll let you respond first, Ben.
Yeah, no, that's fine. Right. Yeah. So thanks, Martin. So what is the risk of allowing employees to use bring your own devices, such as laptops and phones, to access corporate networks, including corporate SharePoint? And what can we do to allow this flexibility, but to protect our assets? Do you want to go first on that, then Leigh?
Yeah, I can do. So specifically, what you do with like CIT, for instance, you need to work out, but there are a few approaches to BYOD. And generally, you have to, you would want to have the same controls as you do on a corporate device. So you would say, for instance, you'd have an acceptable use of asset policy that says, I want them to have antivirus, I want them to be using a firewall, I want the device to be encrypted, I want it to be password protected. Now, to enforce that happens, you've got a couple of options. If you're on a domain, then you can set a GPO, which establishes some of these things. If you're accessing a cloud environment, then you can have access control policies in the cloud environment, which won't let you access the environment unless you have that standard of things on the device. So those are the kind of approaches you would normally think about taking for BYOD. For mobiles, it's similar. Sometimes with mobiles, you have to utilize an MDM or a MAM protection, and that allows you to do things like you can access Exchange on your phone, but you can't save anything locally to your phone, and no other apps can get to it. So the MAM will sort of ring fence that. So there's a few things to think about, but it starts with establish what your security policy is going to look like, and that should be very similar to your corporate policy, because just because they're BYOD, if they're accessing the same data, they're the same risk.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think BYOD is a really kind of it's a nice idea, and it gives employees kind of quite a lot of flexibility, and it's a nice thing to be able to kind of give them, but there is, as you say, risks associated with it. So it's something that should definitely be seriously risk assessed. And as Leigh said, policies are a very, very kind of big thing there. You need to make sure that you as an organization explain what is needed from them to be able to do that. It's not just a case of, sure, you can use your own laptop. There's a lot that needs to be considered. Right, so I will move on. Oh, we've got quite a few now. Brilliant. Another one from Martin. If we move all our data into the cloud, Azure, etc., that is no on-premise data, can I reduce the spend on office level network security? I would say no. And I say that because what you've got in an office is a large concentrated mass of devices, which they're all still as vulnerable as they were. Obviously, when you're looking at cloud security and any security, accessing that data in Azure or SharePoint, for example, you want to make sure that data is protected. First and foremost, two-factor authentication. With cloud data,
you're shifting the perimeter, really, aren't you, Ben? So you still want to look after the endpoints as just the same as you would do if they were in your on-premise. But essentially, what you've done is you've lifted and shifted on-prem and you put it in the cloud. You still want to have sort of appropriate controls in the cloud to look after that. You still want to have like an effective firewall level. You still want to have access controls.
Yeah.
So the money-wise, you may not say, but it might be a more secure and flexible solution for you if you have a lot of people working remotely.
Absolutely. I'll continue on to the next one. So Greg has asked, Is the risk different if you have on-site servers versus fully cloud-based, such as Office, Microsoft 365? Do you want to go for that one first, Leigh?
Yeah, so the risk is different. On-prem, on any on-prem environment, you've got to update the environment. So what I would say is usually on-prem, you've got a higher risk to vulnerabilities. Most of the cloud environments are updated directly by the vendor. So for instance, Office updates their cloud environment before they release patches. So essentially when you're seeing those patches rolled out, they've already applied them to their cloud environment. So by its nature, yes, you've got a little bit more risk inherent with on-site, which is why cloud's becoming sort of more, one of the reasons why cloud's becoming more desirable. But again, you've still got to secure that cloud environment. You still got to have effective controls. You still got to have multi-factor authentication. You still need to make sure that only the right people are accessing that data.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd say in addition to that as well, that you know the risks that we're talking about are not always hackers or people with bad intentions. On-site servers, there's a risk of hardware failure. So hardware failure, there's a risk of someone tripping over a cable
It's a good point.
and bringing you down. So when we're talking about the risks of security, as Leigh said about the
CIA, confidential integrity, yeah,
the availability of the data and the confidentiality of it, things can happen, and yeah, it's not necessarily more, it's just different. And for both sides of things, when we consider security on site and when we consider the security in the cloud, there's different things to consider, and there's obviously crossovers there.
Yeah.
I'm gonna go for Brad. Okay. How can you realistically protect and monitor access on your company cloud storage for small business? I don't mind taking this one first. So obviously with cloud, the main threat is that essentially the cloud is accessible from wherever. And while that is a risk, it's also one of the most significant benefits of having cloud. The thing about it is it needs to be configured properly. There is, if we're talking if we talk specifically kind of Office 365, Microsoft 365, SharePoint, OneDrive, Microsoft have invested a huge amount of money in implementing built-in security tools. As I said before, two-factor authentication is the big one, and I will go on about 2FA until I'm blue in the face because it's so important. So monitoring, there's a number of ways that we can do things there. Microsoft 365 does have built-in things like data loss prevention, data data loss prevention, and bits like that. So
risk analytics and yeah,
absolutely. Built-in. There's all sorts of built-in tools that can be used that all come with, more often than not, come with the licenses that you already have. So I would say in that sense, you can secure data more in the cloud than you can on traditional on-premise with the default licenses, shall we say. And what I would say there is, it'd definitely be worth having a chat with us about what you've got, and how things can be improved. Chris, I currently have CIT Endpoint Security running on my PCs. Is this the same thing as you've described? It depends, Chris. It depends on what kind of level you've got. What I would do is have a chat with your account manager, and just find out what version that you've got there. Have a chat with them about that. Helen, I've attended this webinar on behalf of a colleague who is on holiday. My role is office manager, so not relevant to apart from insurance cover. Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, of course it is. Yeah, that's absolutely fine. I think, to be honest, I think this is kind of relevant to everyone as well. I think just having the knowledge in the back of your head about security, that's definitely a step up.
I can see one more question from Mark, and there was a question around the KP ransomware attack, which I talked about, so I'll expand on that. So the question is, you mentioned the KP ransomware attack is an enterprise situation. What does this mean? What I mean is that KP Snacks is a enterprise-sized organization. Enterprise-sized organization. So by enterprise, we mean a sort of 1,000 users and above. They're a big, vast organization, multi-buildings, multi-tenants, multi-networks, and it's a complicated infrastructure. Typically, enterprises have more complicated protection tools and monitoring tools in place, which reduce the chances of being attacked. But when they are attacked, it's usually a sophisticated attack and there's big money involved. So they've been brought down as an organization just currently. So things like their supply chain is being impacted. So there'll be delays now in terms of them getting food products into supermarkets, processing invoices, just the basic functioning stuff you do as a business. And I dealt with an incident with a company not so long ago, and I'm not going to name companies because the only reason I mentioned KP is because that's public knowledge. It's a news article. But they were a warehouse and they had 1,000 orders in process when they got attacked, over 1,000 orders in process. And they ended up not being able to process any of that. And they were out of business for about 2 weeks. Minimum 2 weeks before they could do anything at all, because the ransomware got its hooked into the environment. It affected their databases, it affected their financial departments, it affected all of their just operational computers. The hand scanners that they went out and picked items with, none of that was working. So it's just fundamentally as a business, it crippled them, and it was all intentional. The threat actors knew this is what it would do, because they want to get that payout.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, I think make sure you go out and hoard as many dry-roasted peanut packets as you can. But yeah, I think that's all the questions. Thank you everyone for coming and staying, and it's probably the big thing. Hope it was useful. What we will be doing is sending out some kind of information after this, including the slides, just to kind of reinforce some bits and you know, some additional information on the actual products we've spoken about with regards to endpoint security. As I said, security is a massive subject and does incorporate everything. So you know, there's many other things that we can do to kind of, you know, help secure things, add that additional layer of protection. You know, the best thing to do would be to give us a shout, see how we can help. But yeah, I think that's it from us. So no, thanks Leigh for taking time out of your day to give me a hand.
No, thank you for having me. Been great to be on today.
Right, thank you very much. I will end this.